You are very cordially,
you are very cordially invited to a party.
and it will be a grand affair.
Grand affair.
And it will be a grand affair hosted by the Hatter. We do hope that you can come.
You could come.
We
do hope that you could come to share it all the joy.
Greetings and salutations, Batman.
Batman Arkham Origins is a 2013 action-adventure game developed by Warner Bros. Games Montreal and published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. Arkham Origins is a follow-up to the 2011 video game Batman Arkham City, and is the third main installment in the Batman Arkham series. The game's main storyline is set 8 years before the 2009's Batman Arkham Asylum, and follows a younger, less refined Batman. When a bounty is placed on him by crime lord Black Mass, drawing 8 of the world's greatest assassins to Gotham City on Christmas Eve, Batman must bring Black Mass to justice, whilst also hunted by the police and having to face other villains such as the Joker and Anarchy, who take advantage of the chaos to launch their own master plans. Batman Arkham Origins seems to be the forgotten game in the Batman Arkham series, and I'm a bit confused as to why. I've played the games many times and even think some of the story elements and general script are better than the previous games. For example, one scene that comes to mind is when Alfred begs Bruce not to go out again, as he knows there are too many for him to fight and that he will likely end up dead.
In good conscience allow you to go. You're outmatched by these assassins.
What?
You're not some hardened vigilante. You're a young man with a trust fund and too much anger. You're in over your head, and I don't want this to be your end.
Alfred, who do you see when you look at me? The boy whose shoes you used to tie every morning? The teenager you drove to his first date? While you are here every night, I am out there. The only thing between the innocent and the predator.
Be.
No, not maybe. I am. When the mugger or the thief stops to think twice, that is fear. That is what I am. That is why they hired assassins, because I am the reason the criminals breathe easier when the sun rises. So no, Alfred, I am not in over my head. Tonight will be my end, but it will be theirs.
This reminded me of the Christopher Nolan movies, especially The Dark Knight Rises, and although that movie isn't amazing overall, the scene with Alfred still stands out. This is where Alfred threatens and, in the end, does leave Bruce on his own as he is afraid and recognises the imminent danger that Bruce is in. He leaves as he cannot watch him die at the hands of these people, as he has already experienced it before with the death of Martha and Thomas Wayne.
Why did you say that name?
Anyway, back to Arkham Origins. I have a few theories for why this game gets so much hate and is underappreciated. Number 1 is the general tone and style of the game. You can tell pretty much straight away that this game was inspired from the Nolan series, as it tries to tone down elements from the first 2 games in order to give it a more realistic feel. For example, Batman in one of the first scenes interrogates someone and then throws him off the building into a Christmas tree. You don't see this sort of thing in other games, and when you do it, it's a lot more laid back and calm. Whereas in this game, they go for a more gritty tone and they use less comic book elements. DC Montreal then add humour to the game, but in a subtle way. I'll play the scene from the game so you have a better idea of what I mean.
Get away!
Where's the Penguin?
I don't know.
Where is he?
I swear.
Time to talk. Where's Cobblepot?
Let me go!
If you insist.
Please, stop! Stop! I'll talk. I'll tell you anything you want to know, please!
Too late. I already have what I need.
No!
Talk, or you won't be walking anywhere, ever.
No way! You gotta answer for dropping me off that rooftop, buddy!
No, you have to answer to me. How does this disruptor work?
Ask one of the pigs! They got it in evidence lockup!
How about we take a little walk up to the roof?
Okay, you win! It jams weapons, overrides electronic locks, alright? Now you gotta let me go!
How'd that work out for you last time?
Then if we watch an interrogation scene from Arkham City, you'll see that they're completely different.
Where's Freeze?
He's in the museum. Penguin's got him.
I'll have to cut that tongue out of your head, boy. I don't know people telling tales on me.
No. I'm sorry, Mr. Cobblepot.
If we then compare it to Batman Begins, I think you can definitely see they took inspiration from Christopher Nolan's series. I don't think this was the only inspiration, and I definitely think they looked at other comic books to get a more gritty tone. But I definitely think you can't deny that there are similarities here.
Where were the other drugs going?
I never knew. I don't know. I swear to God.
Swear to me!
Obviously, again, there are still comic book elements, but I feel like the studio decided to take a more realistic approach, which means they lost the tone of the previous Arkham games. Another example I can give you is a look at the characters themselves. Let's start with the Joker. They've kept the overall theme, but if you look closely, they have added little subtle changes that make it look more dark and down to earth, I suppose. Look at the eyes, they scream evil. Look at the smile, it's more sinister, and look at the outfit. Now compare this to the original Joker model in the other Arkham games, and it looks more like it's from a comic book. It looks less serious, and the colour scheme is less vibrant. The Joker in Origins does not give off the same vibe. He comes off more like a terrorist who is set out to destroy Gotham because he thinks it is needed, or because he just wants to have fun. Now you could argue that this is because he hasn't met the Batman yet and other suits come into play then, but that doesn't change the fact that his actual face looks like another person. I also have another example. Let's move on to, for example, Bane. In Asylum, Bane is basically straight from the comic books, and again it gives that more light-hearted tone to the game. Now look at Bane in Origins. For a start, he is smaller, there are less tubes going into his body, and he doesn't have that weird clunky looking plate thing on his waist. Instead, in Origin, he looks more like a gangster, more grounded and more serious. His outfit is, well, exactly that. It's an outfit that it looks like he's chosen and not been forced to wear. Again, I don't know enough about the comics to comment on this entirely, and it could be related to the progression of the story, but even at the end of Arkham Origins, the modern tone still remains. Albeit, yes, I admit there are tubes coming out of him and he does look more like the Arkham Asylum Bane, but I still think that grittiness is still there. So I now want to move on to gameplay, and this brings me to my next point about why the game gets forgotten, and I think it's because of the combat. That's not to say that the combat in this game is bad, it's just very, very similar to the other games, and they don't innovate on it much from the combat that was there already from City. Now, I think I know the reason for this because I've watched a lot of their interviews for the press screenings in 2013, and a lot of the time it comes up that they didn't want to innovate too much on the combat because what already was there was so good. And to me, when I watched the interviews, it just came off like they were a bit scared to touch it because of what the previous studio, Rocksteady, had already done. And I also think they were aware that they were going to come back and do Arkham Knight. Most of the combat is exactly the same as the previous two games, other than some gadgets that he now has, even though the game is set before the other two games, so it doesn't really make sense thematically, but I digress. Me, on a personal level, I just felt when playing that the game that the gadgets had only really served a purpose for one element of the game, and I feel like they could have allowed for a more player agency. Like, for example, there are many possibilities when in combat to use the gadgets, but they don't really let you do much in the way of variety, so sometimes when you're doing the stealth gameplay it can get boring. And to be honest, most of the gadgets don't have a big enough impact for you to use regularly, and it's easier just using your fist and doing utilising the stealth kills. One example that I can think of is the smoke grenade. For me, this was an issue as it doesn't last long enough for you to be able to make use of it out of it, and the sticky thing that is meant to disable people only really lasts for like 2 seconds, so by the time you've gotten to the enemies, they've got their gun and they are shooting you again, and it's just a complete waste of time. However, I do feel like the smoke pellets are good for getting away, they're just not very good if you want to use them as a distraction and then fly in. But anyway, it just felt like they didn't have enough time or money to really refine all the options in the game when it came to the combat. I would try to kind of plan my attack and do it in a way that was interesting, but I often was let down by the game's weird choices. I mean, it could just be me that I'm bad at the game, or maybe I'm not quick enough, but I play a lot of stealth games and this just doesn't compare to those, which is kind of weird to say, as Batman is meant to be like the ultimate stealth hero who you don't see often, and he takes his enemies out in the shadows and is less kind of direct and he's not expected. But in this game I just gave up and ended up trying to fight everyone or doing the easy option, which was swinging to each gargoyle and then taking enemies down that way. However, that being said, I do think that the boss fights in this game, especially Deathstroke, who is my favourite boss fight in the entire series, what made it for me was I think the trailer, in all honesty. That trailer was so good and just got me so hyped to play this game that I don't think they were going to disappoint me when I got to it, because I was just excited to fight Deathstroke instead of like the Joker and Poison Ivy, just because the reason I like Batman is because he's more realistic than the other heroes. So when he comes up against Deathstroke, who's literally just, you know, a martial artist who is very skilled like Batman, it just made for a more interesting fight. I do think, though, that trailer is the reason that other people have a problem with this game, because, well, I mean, I'll just play the clip. If you watch a bit of this trailer, now if you watch the actual fight, it's completely different. It's in a different location, and I just think the marketing let themselves down because it wasn't the game that people were expecting. They didn't market it like they should have. But yeah, in terms of the gameplay and the boss fights, I think that's its strongest kind of elements. I would say that when you're going around the city, though, it's really boring because there's no one in the city. They came up with some excuse for reason for this, but it's just bland. Like, you go down and walk around and there's just no one there. Moving on as well, I also think that for some reason in this game, if you glide kick, somehow everyone hears it, even if they're miles away. And there's also these thing called smash takedowns. Basically, if you do that, everyone instantly knows where you are. It's just a bit annoying, and it kind of ruins the experience sometimes. There's also a really annoying camera at some points. I mean, they've been quite clever in how they've pulled the camera back so you can see around Batman, but there are some elements where you're like in a corridor and you just can't physically see what you're doing, and it just ruins the momentum that you build up. However, one of the most satisfying things I found in this game is when you perform a beatdown and then one enemy is trying to kind of attack you and you counter him, and then you go back to the beatdown. That was one of my other, I don't know, it just felt so satisfying doing it. Anyway, I think that will wrap up the review. Do I think you should play this game in 2021? I definitely do, especially if you haven't played the games before. If you're kind of new and you're just getting into the Batman Arkham series, I would recommend playing Origins first, obviously, because it's a prequel. Don't play them in the order that they're released, play them in chronological order, so play Batman Arkham Origins, then Asylum, then City, and then Night. I definitely think this game is underappreciated, and I definitely think you should play it. In my opinion, I don't think it's the worst in the series. I mean, worst is a strong word. I don't think any of the games are bad, but I don't think this one is the weakest. I think because of its age, I think Batman Arkham Asylum is probably the weakest. The best is probably City or Night. I mean I could go on about Night in another video because I feel like the Batmobile makes that game great, but it also ruins it. But anyway, yeah, so I think Origins is probably the third best game in the series, and I definitely think you should play it. Anyway, if you like this video, please like, subscribe and comment. Let me know what you thought of this game, and I'll see you next time.
Now this
Up!